Morning, fellow coffee chat friends. Steve here again with a little update on our last coffee chat meeting which took place this week. We were probably, I think we were 23 people in a different room, which we had to be out of by 9 o'clock, but I think it still went over pretty well. We did break up into groups for most of the meeting, too, because with 23 and the way the room was configured, it was going to be difficult for us to be able to talk to everybody at once. Once again, we did go around the room with comments, and then we broke into 3 groups, I believe it was 4 groups, and had independent discussions of the smaller groups, and then we reported on what we learned from the groups afterwards. What I'll do here is, in typical tradition, I'll go through and give some points as to what I picked out from the initial round, and then maybe I'll find something in the individual groups as well. So we went around the room, and the topic was self-esteem, the importance of self-esteem mainly, and the initial question was, what do you think of self-esteem, as we went around and introduced ourselves. I'll just read off some things. One guy said that self-esteem can be worked on, so it's not something that's static. Another one said we can forget about what other people think of us in terms of letting us govern our lives. Somebody also said that self-esteem is about self-respect, which is different than self-confidence. We can be sometimes confident but maybe not have as much self-respect as we could. Somebody also said that it can be a coping mechanism. So if we have a higher self-esteem, it's easier for us to cope with things, I suppose. How we feel about ourselves, how we treat ourselves. Somebody also said that it's like a filter we perceive the world through, and we have the ability to change it. Somebody also said when we have a higher self-esteem, in other words, we like ourselves, it's easier for others to like us. Believe in self has a lot to do with it, somebody said. Self-talk comes into play, how we talk about ourselves. Somebody also said that how we carry ourselves reflects our self-esteem, our physical posture, this sort of thing. Somebody says that we need to work on this all the time, and our self-esteem takes a hit when we continue to compare ourselves to others. Somebody says that there's positive and negative self-esteem, and sometimes a negative self-esteem can be helpful if we can learn from it and eventually turn that into self-love. Somebody mentioned that there's a difference between self-esteem and social esteem. I thought that was quite interesting. Where self-esteem is an inward job, and the social esteem is what other people think of us. So we can say that we hold somebody in high esteem. Well, that's me saying that about that somebody else. But what does that somebody else say and feel about his or her own self-esteem? Somebody said it has to do with self-worth, an estimate of self-worth. Somebody said that it affects our energy level. We could see that, right? High self-esteem, we could tend to be more energetic, I suppose. And this lady said that complimenting others until we get a twinkle in their eye will help their self-esteem. Maybe their social esteem, but probably their self-esteem too. But it can also help ours, because when we help others, we tend to lift ourselves up. Somebody said that it matters what we're thinking and doing. It really does matter, because that'll end by affecting our self-esteem. Somebody also mentioned that the way we communicate affects us. That was our round of intros. Not everybody commented because it's completely voluntary. So now for our group breakout sessions, there are about 4 or 5 people in each group. Maybe more like 6 or 7, I suppose. There was lots of things that came up something was talked about how when we endeavor to make somebody else happy or another, to serve them in our jobs, to think of that whatever we're doing in our jobs is the service of others. We do our best. We get to feel good about it because we've done our best, but also we get to help others, and that can build us up a little bit. I'm just picking out a few things here that came out. Talked about bullying and how that can affect people's self-esteem in a big way. So it's the difference between men and women in self-esteem. Women often are concerned more about, say, body image as an example. Yeah, that was one group. Another group talked about how low self-esteem can result in terrible acts of, teenagers cutting themselves, and this sort of thing to get attention. Core beliefs, social media. Some of the ways to improve is to stop believing the lies that we're less than. Surrounding ourselves with positive people, accepting ourselves and being courageous. Being aware of self-esteem. Another group talked about, thought I missed a group. Oh, maybe I did miss a group. Well, here's another group that said, awareness is important, being aware of the importance of self-esteem, and who and what we compare ourselves to if we do at all, and what is our concept of self. And being aware of the tendency to look outside of ourselves and to buy into shoulds all the time. Maybe asking the question, am I the person I really want to be? Being a contributor helps with self-esteem, somebody said. And what's affected our self-esteem too is the tendency of modern society to become disconnected from other people in our different forms of relationship with social media and such. But what can help with this is rituals, routine, meditations, blowing bubbles. I guess it's a distraction sometimes. If we're in a low self-esteem, if we just do something different, it can help us. Stop negative thinking, start dancing. Gratitude journal. Perhaps certain authors and mentors. All those sort of things can help. I just wanted to share with you a few thoughts that I had on the topic as well. I would say that I started out by saying that the word esteem basically is a noun, which means respect, admiration, typically for a person. So when we say self-esteem, this is respect and admiration of self, or respect especially, I would say. But we also say that in terms of holding somebody. You hear sometimes that person is held in high esteem or low esteem. Well, it's admiration of that other person, right? And the origin of the word esteem is the same as the word estimate. An estimate is a rough calculation or judgment of a value. And the origin of that word estimate, it comes from consider to be. So I thought that was really helpful, because if I looked at the term self-esteem, if it's the same root as estimate, an estimate originated as consider to be, what do we consider ourselves to be? We can see that the mistake we so often make if there's low self-esteem is that we consider ourselves to be somehow less than or low. Whereas that, when we think about it, it's false. I would say it's false because, here's my perspective on it anyways. If we think about it, nobody can for sure say how it is that we're here as a human race, as nature, and even as individual human beings. Okay, we know the reproductive systems and these sorts of things, but what's the rest of the story? The rest of the story we never really know, for sure. But one thing we can say is that because we're created, there must be that which creates us. And I'm going to use the term force with a capital F here. The force which creates us. Because whenever we create something, we need to put some force into it, right? Some energy, some effort. Well, since we cannot even grasp we're continuing to learn. We don't even understand all of creation. So how can we possibly understand what creates us? So it appears to be infinite, and yet we're created. So because we're created by something so grandiose we can't even understand it, what does that make us? It makes us an extension of that which creates us. We become persons of an infinite force. And to begin to look at ourselves that way, rather than some drawn out little fragment which has to compare itself to everything else, which results in always never measuring up. Always. If we see ourselves as an extension of an infinitely powerful force which creates us, it's a whole other perspective, which is more accurate, I would say, and which allows no room for low self-estimate or low consideration of what we are. It's an infinite consideration of what we are, which, relative to the nothingness, is a higher self-estimate or a self-esteem. So everybody's got their ways. That's one thing that I use. Whenever I find myself in those moments that so many of us do, where we feel we're just not measuring up in some way, to consider that for a moment. Consider the idea of infinity. Consider the idea of possibility which exists, and that we don't even know what we are, let alone that which creates us. How can we consider ourselves to be less than in any way when we don't even know for sure our capabilities? It's a false impression, I would say. It's a way of looking at it. And as other people mentioned too, in the discussion we had, the habit of becoming grateful for all the blessings that we do have and all the challenges we do have too, because they are really blessings in disguise for us to learn. That also helps our self-esteem, because we get to realize just how much we do have and how much opportunity we do have, which kind of buoys us up in that moment. It's almost like using little tricks on ourselves in a way, because we've been trained through what somebody maybe called the social esteem of what we've been taught in societies and whatnot, that somehow we're to be compared. We're comparative. And to an extent that is true, because we have this individual, there's you and I and him and them, all this sort of thing going on. That's true. But what is it behind it? As Paul Harvey used to say, the rest of the story. We never know it. All we can sense is that it's infinite, and therefore a sense of low self-esteem is a limiting factor. And we can throw it aside, though we can feel it. We can realize even rationally that it's nonsensical and move on in our lives in spite of those senses. Great chat, everyone. I look forward to another discussion in a couple of weeks. Until then, have yourself a great many days. Talk to you later. Bye-bye.